This is the 1920s lesson and lecture 6, the stock market crash. You can see this is one of the most famous images from a time frame that is one of our most famous periods of time, but not one of the most proud periods of time, the Great Depression. So let's explain what that means, that the market crashes. So, as we were saying in the previous lesson, there were warning signs that we should have paid attention to, but we didn't. People felt like this good economy of the 1920s was just going to continue, and they didn't seem worried. So, one of the reasons that people felt good about the economic situation was something called the Dow Jones. So, the Dow Jones Industrial Average, which basically is the average of stock prices of major industries, was reaching an all time high in September of 1929, meaning stocks were being valued very high. So if you bought stock in big companies and you had that stock, you thought that stock was very, very valuable. The problem was it was never really as valuable as it appeared to be. And people started to figure this out. The day that things start to go backwards is famously called Black Thursday. By October of 1929, stock prices started coming down. And worried investors who saw their value of their stock coming down began to sell their stock. They started to panic. They started to be afraid that if they don't sell now, they're not going to get their money back. They wanted to make some money, or they don't want to lose a ton of money, so they tried to sell as fast as possible. Well, the more people who are willing to sell stock for a particular company, the less valuable that stock is. It's not a commodity anymore. People don't want it. Now, the business leaders and the political leaders around the country tried to calm everybody down and told Americans not to worry, everything will be fine, the prices will come back up. That's what happens. I mean, if you play the stock market, this is what happens all the time. Like stock prices go up and stock prices come down. They're oftentimes like a roller coaster. If you are someone who panics and gets nervous real easily, then this may not be the game for you. But if you are someone who can be patient and let things kind of ride out, then normally you'll be okay. Well, on Monday, October 28th, as prices fell even more, investors raced to get their money out of the stock market, and it all goes downhill from here. You can see this is Wall Street, and people, investors, all showing up, trying to get their money. Well, the most famous day of all the stock market crash situation is what is called Black Tuesday. It is October 29th, 1929. And a record 16.4 million shares of stock were sold. Again, the more stock that's being sold, the less valuable those stocks become. So the collapse of the stock market becomes known as the Great Crash. And as the crash continues, by November 13th, this is 2 weeks later, overall losses of people trying to get anything they can for their stock and the value of their stocks falling, people lost $30 billion in 2 weeks. Now, again, you have to have some patience if you're going to play the stock market game and understand that our economy works in cycles. Our business cycle, which is a span in which the economy grows, then contracts, is normal. The problem is when people don't understand that, and when they panic and everybody wants to sell, then bad things are going to happen to good people. So you can see, according to the Brooklyn Daily Eagle, Wall Street in panic as stocks crash. So, what does this mean to normal, everyday people and businesses? Initially, the crash was only felt by those heavily invested in the stock market. So if you're someone who doesn't invest in the stock market, then this didn't affect you at all at first. But within a short time, the effects began to ripple throughout the nation's economy. First of all, you had a lot of businesses who had gone to banks and taken out what they thought were like a good loan. For banks, they were kind of risky. And the problem is that if businesses are losing money because of the situation, businesses can't repay their loans. And if you can't repay your loan, then the bank comes in and takes your business. Um, Consumers were borrowing money from banks to buy cars, to buy appliances, to buy homes. And now, if you've lost your job because your business has gone under, or if you are were laid off because the or if you owned a business and it's not doing well, or you had stock in businesses and now you're not making money, you can't pay off your debt. And if you can't pay off your debt, the bank is now going to take whatever it was that you were borrowing money for. So you just lost your appliances, you just lost your house, you just lost your car. Uh, Bank runs. People were actually running to the banks to try to get their money out. And here's the problem: like your money, when you put money in a bank, that money is not sitting there like under your name, like in your file, in your little safe in the bank. And that money's there anytime you want to come get it. Back then, the money came in, you put money in the bank, and that money went out to someone borrowing it, and that money is coming in and out of a bank all the time. They just keep track of it. Back then, your money was not insured, meaning if something like this were to happen, you may lose everything. Today, your money is insured up to so many hundreds of thousands of dollars. I want to say maybe 350,000 or $400,000. So if you're someone who has a lot of money, if you have, millions of dollars, you probably don't put it all in one bank. You probably move it around to a lot of different banks. That's a problem I would love to have. I don't have that problem. Um, so people are taking their money out of banks. So if they're taking their money out of banks, at some point the bank runs out of money, and now you got a line of people who want their money, and the bank's telling them, we don't have any money left." So now we have what are called bank failures. This is a combo of the bank runs and then people who can't pay their loans. So the bank has no money coming in, and other people who want their money out of the bank, and there's no money there. So these kind of scenes would pop up in front of banks where these crowds of people who were just angrily demanding their money, and the banks weren't even opening their doors. They're trying to tell everybody, we don't have any money to give you. People aren't paying their loans off. So we don't have any money coming in. Therefore, we don't have any money to give you, even though it says it's your money. Well, 9 million bank accounts were just wiped out. Like if you had money in a savings account in a bank, you just lost it. It's gone. There's no getting it back. Um, Now businesses can't go to a bank and borrow money because banks have no money to give you. Well, if a business can't borrow money to buy equipment or to produce goods, well, then there's cuts in production. Now we're not producing those goods. And if we're not producing those goods, the goods that are out there become very expensive. And if goods are very expensive in a situation like this, very few people can afford to buy them. We also have a rise in unemployment. Businesses were cutting production and laying off workers. So now you have more and more people who don't have jobs. And you see what are all men, right, in line, trying to collect some sort of unemployment, trying to get a free meal. This was one of the soup lines. This was a very common sight. But what you have is men who are out there trying to find a job, trying to find a way to support their family. Back then, it wasn't normal that mom, had a job too. Mom was home raising the kids and taking care of the house, and so this was a very difficult situation, and kind of a punch to the ego of men in the family who couldn't support their families. The Great Crash triggered the most serious downturn in U.S. history, and it becomes famously known as the Great Depression, which is starts in 1929, ends around 1941. You could argue the ending date, but 1941 is also the year that we end up getting attacked by the Japanese, and into World War II. And there is not a coincidence that the Great Depression ends around the same time we end up going to war. So, how does this impact normal, everyday people, the lower class and lower middle class people, workers and farmers? With no money and no incentive to produce goods, factories began to close. So, thousands of workers lost their jobs or took pay cuts. And if factories closed, then small local businesses suffered as well, like restaurants. Restaurants rely on factories and warehouses and slaughterhouses and places that are going to get them set up with the equipment that they need, the food that they need to serve, and they couldn't survive this either. By 1932, so this is 3 years in, over 12 million people were unemployed. That's about 25% of the labor force. That's one out of every four people who should be working not working. And like I said before, the soup lines with very proud men who once had a job and can support their family now are just trying to survive, and they're taking a handout. In the end, nobody wants a handout. Like you want to be able to be proud of who you are and be proud of being able to put money in or earn money and put food on the table and a roof over your house, over your family's heads, and be proud of who you are and what you've accomplished. These are guys who are struggling with that right now. As you can imagine, suicide rates were up very high. Uh, Guys were jumping off bridges and out of windows and stuff to kill themselves just so their family could collect the insurance. And then, of course, the insurance companies figured out that this is what was happening, and then you couldn't collect for something like that. But again, more guys, trying to get handouts, trying to survive, trying to get a job. These guys were humiliated. I mean, and humiliation is one of those things that motivate people to do things that they wouldn't normally do. These are guys who would resort to stealing and doing things to whatever they could to help survive or help their family survive. And that's not what they would normally do. But when times are tough, you got to take care of your family. You started to see these pop up, Hoovervilles. Homeless people who have lost everything, have lost their homes, started building what became known as shanty towns or Hoovervilles. They were named after the president to mock him, but they were built of whatever they could find: scrap metal, cardboard, tar paper, whatever they could, leftover stuff from other projects. And they would put together whatever little shack they could and just try to survive. This is Charles Street, Hooverville. Farm prices are falling even more, which means if the farm prices are falling, um, well, there's a couple issues that are going to hit farmers here. But if the value of their farms are coming down and they can't sell their goods and they can't produce goods because they also had some environmental issues like dust storms, creating drought and just destroying their opportunity to make money. All of this was just contributing to just this horrible time frame, this Great Depression. The Great Plains became known as the Dust Bowl. Just an awful scene where you just had this dry, deserted land that was once good farmland that just has dried out because it wasn't enough water. It wasn't raining. They couldn't find the resources they needed to keep their soil fertile and productive. Well, on top of all this, I mean, imagine the stress on society is now creating health problems. Not only, when people are stressed, does it create health problems, but now you've got so many people living in crowded dwellings. You've got unhealthy scenarios. I mean, living in those shanty towns, you don't have clean water, you don't have electricity, you're living in squalor, and then you're also kind of humiliated because of your status. Again, one of the most famous images of the Great Depression, where people were resorting to anything they could and just trying to survive. This is going to be a this is now a lot of people are going to survive this, and they're going to be stronger because of it. They're going to learn to live with less. Um, but so, like I said, this is a big negative time in our history, but we're going to pull through stronger because of it. From the original Spider-Man.